Are you the parent or caregiver of a child who's around 3 years old, 3 to 3.5, and maybe they have started preschool or they've been in preschool for a few months, and you're wondering how to help them with their speech sounds or how to help them sound clearer to their friends and to adults? Well, you've come to the right place. This is part 3 in a series of how to help your 3-year-old sound clearer. And we're going to be talking about the sounds that are expected at the age of 3 that you can particularly focus on. But before that, a quick introduction. Hi, my name is Amini. I'm a speech and language pathologist with several years of experience working with children and their parents to boost speech and language development. And I also have a practice in the Bay Area, California, Smarter Speech, where I do the same. My mission with this YouTube channel is to empower parents and caregivers, especially those with children under the age of 5, because this is when a child's speech and language is developing so rapidly, and just little changes that you make in the way that you talk or play with your child has huge implications for speech and language development and also for learning development down the line. So without further ado, let's get started. So the main sound that I look for at the age of 3 that should be emerging or developing is the K and G sound. So at the age of 1, you're looking for P, B, and M. At the age of 2, you're looking for T, D, and N. And at the age of 3 is when you start to see those back sounds, or the sounds that come from the back of the throat, the K and the G, or the K and the G sounds coming in. So how can you help your child with getting the K and G sounds? I have 3 tips. So the first thing that I would say to look out for is if your child is substituting K, G with T, D. So for example, if for cat, they're saying tat, or for good, they're saying dud. So that's a phonological process. It's something that a child does to make a sound easier to say. And this phonological process should start to fade around 3. So if, as the months go by, you're not seeing a difference here, so you're still continuing to see that swapping of K for T and G for D, that does mean that there's fronting going on. And it's worthwhile to mention this to a preschool teacher, or maybe to mention this to a local speech therapist to see if you qualify for some speech therapy. It's very easily fixed. And if it is happening often enough, that is something that you want to mention and work on sooner than later. So the first thing would be to check for fronting, check to see if the fronting is consistent. And if so, you might want to mention this to a professional near you. The second tip that I have is just to start emphasizing the K and G sounds over and over again in your daily routines. Because when you start emphasizing and changing the way you talk, your child is definitely going to notice. And when they notice, they will also start, without knowing it, trying to emphasize the sounds. So in terms of when to use these sounds, for the K especially, I love to do this with anything that has to do with cookies. So this cute little book, May I Please Have a Cookie, is a great example, because every time there is a cookie or cooking, I have a great opportunity to emphasize the K sound. So if I were reading this book, for example, I would say cookie. Notice how I added that burst of air. I really held out the sound. That helps the child really notice the sound that I'm making. So cooking, for example, there's that G, cooking, the cookies, or trying the cookies, or cookie, things like that. So cookie is a great time, or anything to do with cooking. So if you've got a cooking set, this is a great time to emphasize the K and the G sounds. So maybe you are tasting some really good soup. So, oh, this is so good. So notice the way that I emphasized the G. I held it out. It is so good. You can point out the foods that are green. So here's our green lettuce, our green peas, our green leaves. And maybe we're going to cook all of these. So we're going to put them in and we are going to cook all of them. So put the lid on and cook. So again, adding that burst of air and those few seconds of emphasis can really help your child notice the sound, and maybe subconsciously they will also try to emphasize the sound as they're talking, and it'll just help them along with acquiring or getting that sound. So again, cooking is a great way anytime we're talking about cookies or even, so a lot of toys around this age have cake. You can talk about cutting the cake or cooking the cake or candle. All of those are great targets if that's something that you're looking for. That's another great way to emphasize the K and G. So the last tip that I have is actually to show your child how to make the K and the G sound. You want to use this one sparingly, don't overdo it, but you really do want to show your child, especially if you see them either dropping the sound or substituting the sound with something else, you want to show your child how you're making that sound. So say, for example, you're using the word cut, right? And your child says top, fronting. And then you can say, yeah, you're right, we're going to cut. See, it comes from here, from the back. Cut. Or you can even kind of do a mini cough. So like that to show it sounds like a cough. Again, you don't want to overdo this one because you don't want your child hurting their vocal cords as they try to cough, but you can show that the sound is coming from the back of the throat instead of coming from the front of the mouth. So can you make a little cough and then say cut? So you can do that a few times just to get across the point of how to make the sound. You can also just use the cue of pointing at your throat or just touching very slightly here for your child so that they know where the sound is coming from. So that's a touch cue. You can use that, or you can use the cue of the cough or the gargle. I like to do gargle for G. So if I'm saying good, like good, or like a growl. So we growl out the G, growl, for example. So you can use that, but use it sparingly so we're not causing any issues with our vocal cords. So those are our three. Watch out for fronting, emphasize your K and G often in targeted activities that will have K and G sounds. And finally, you can show how exactly you're making the K and G at the back of your throat, add a growl or a cough if needed once in a while. All right, so if you're starting to notice that the K and G are not coming in, especially as your child is more months into being 3, that is something you want to mention to a preschool teacher or a speech therapist. Earlier intervention is always better, so get help from a professional if you are concerned. If you want more resources on preschool speech development, this is our last tip out of the 3 on speech clarity for 3-year-olds. But if you want to know more about speech or language, you can check out the resources in the description box below. I have a link to our mailing list where you'll get a free monthly tip on speech and language development. There's also a link to our ebooks, a link to our parent education courses, and you'll also find a link to some of the toys that I demoed on this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this helped you, and happy talking.